that are going through these experiences, these transactions?
In some cases, yes, and I'll tell you what happens is that, and I've consulted a lot of people on short sales and foreclosure just from the legal aspects of it, not necessarily the tax aspects, but let's consider someone who bought a property in 1998 and paid $200,000 for it, and it was in an area where the appraisal got out of hand, and they were kind of living off the house, and they did refi after refi after refi, and maybe by 2005 the value was $1 million on this $200,000 house, and now the value's like $300,000. It's sort of, it went down a lot, and they've refied like crazy. Well, if you think about the 200 purchase price and then the 300 sale today, they've got a gain, and they would, in fact, part of the so-called problem, if you will, would be shielded by this homeowner exclusion rule, the 121 rule. Mm-hmm. So one of the important things to remember on the short sale or the debt forgiveness, the lender is going to issue, in most cases, a 1099-C. That's a report that gives the lender's opinion of the value of the property at the date that the property was seized. It's very important to evaluate the nature of the transaction and also to evaluate whether the fair market value stated on that form is accurate. Mm-hmm. Because let's say, for instance, that the property was stated at $300,000 in my example. The form says the property value at the date of the foreclosure was $300,000, and you can demonstrate reasonably that it's really $400,000. Mm-hmm. If you can do that, you create gain that could be excluded under this 121 rule, and at the same time, you reduce ordinary income from the cancellation of debt. Mm-hmm. So the takeaway on that point is that don't necessarily believe the 1099 if it's just because it's in writing, it was issued by a bank or some kind of institution. Drill down a bit.
Yeah. So the real starting point on all of this, I think, is what's happened related to the mortgage for the property.
Correct.
Because if you've never had a refi, obviously this isn't probably an issue. Well, one thing, you probably have non-recourse debt anyway.
Correct.
But if you had these refis, and then, like you said, they were living off the money, it wasn't being used for the improvement of the property, then it's not going to qualify for the exclusion that applies for principal residence debt that's out there that so many people are taking
right.
advantage of.
I mean, that's, the corollary of what I said is that you've got this, you want to make it to be a gain on paper. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you're going to have this cancellation of debt income, and that's just an unfortunate reality. That's not going to be excluded by this rule. Just mm-hmm. because it's your house and just because the income relates to your house, just because you live there for 2 years, that's going to be ordinary income one way or the other.
Well, yeah, unless, like I said, the debt relates to the acquisition of the
residence. Yeah, there's certain rules, insolvency, bankruptcy, and that kind of thing.
Right. Okay. So, I think we've actually hit most of the high points here. So maybe what we should talk about a little bit more is this area of conversion, and as it relates to maybe these exchanges and so forth, and the safe harbors that have come out.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting rule that we should touch on. It's called 121. I'm going to say D10.
Okay.
The rules. What happened is that in '97 we had this rule that says you live in your property 2 out of the last 5 years, and you sell it, and you get this exclusion, a permanent gain. So real estate investors took advantage of the rule. There was a perceived loophole. So what would happen is, let's say I owned an office building, for example. I sell it in a 1031 exchange. I buy a single-family home mm-hmm. of equivalent value. So I've avoided the gain over here, big gain.
Right. Say
$500,000 in gain. I use that property as a rental property. It's an investment for some length of time, a year. There's no bright line time test. The IRS might tell you 2 years, but there's no real exact test on that.
Okay.
Then, after that 1 or 2 years is over, I move into that property. I live there for a couple of years. Now I've satisfied the 121, the home sale exclusion rule.
Right.
And the gain from the office building that I sold over here was now excluded in this exclusion rule related to home sales. So anyway, that was going on about 7 years. And then in late 2004, the Congress enacted this rule that said, we got you, we understand what you're doing, but we're going to make another condition here.
That's right.
We're going to require you to own this second property for 5 years. So they've changed the rule. Instead of 2 out of the last 5 years, we want you to own it for 5 years.
It's 5 out of 10 or something like that.
No, it's just 5. It's just 5 years.
Just 5 years.
So if they bought it on June 15th of 2005, then today they could sell it. Okay.
Okay.
So that was an important change.
Right.
And the other big change again was this revenue raiser, was this 121B5, this non-qualifying use.
Right.
And that was intended partially to pick up some people who might have been using the gain or the property values for one of the strategies I like in 1031 exchange when you're tired of just rolling over, is to sell a property and then buy an investment house in Carmel, which, boy, after a couple of years, the investment intent ends and then you move in there, you slide in there for some beach time, personally.
Right.
So that was sort of the philosophy, is it was soak the rich. Congress says it's easy for the rich to pay taxes. Don't get me started, we only have 2 minutes.
So, but in any case, that there are an awful lot of people that sort of, well, they converted, what may have been the principal residence to a vacation home, and their vacation home to the principal residence, what have you. So,
right.
Anyway.
So the rule is useful. I think the main takeaway here is the rule is useful in the ordinary sense for people to sell their house and they sort of have a gain and they get an exclusion. I mean, $500,000 gain in most parts of the country is pretty extraordinary. California, not so much. I mean,
in our area, it's been nothing.
It's been nothing. But the rule can be, for lack of a better word, manipulated to trigger some benefits, if provided you give a long enough time frame. And it cannot be after the fact. It can't be, okay, I did this, now save me. In the April 15th conversation, it has to be really, I'm thinking about doing this, and then you have to allow yourself a time horizon to adjust your conduct and adjust the use of these properties and so forth.
Yeah, and we're not going to get into any details here, but just that there are other taxes to think about, like property taxes, change of ownership rules, and all the other things. So when you're doing these things, you may actually be creating some bigger bills for yourself that you may not think about.
Yeah, it has to be a starting point today, not an end point.
Okay, well, I think we're getting down to about a minute left here, so I think I'll just throw it back to you and see if you may have some final words of wisdom again, maybe to share with people related to sale of residence.
Oh, I think one of the things you just said is correct. I mean, I think you have to look at the totality of the situation. This is a tool. I think people read something on the internet or in the newspaper and they take it and run with it and let their imagination run away with themselves. They really need to seek someone who's not only a tax counselor, but somebody who can sort of give them a little bit of non-tax considerations as well, because the situation is so complicated.
Right. Okay, well, Scott, thank you again for being my guest today. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we'll be getting together again before too long. And folks, I hope you've learned a lot about selling a residence today, things to think about when you're dealing with that situation. And we'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.